Thank goodness. So next, we're going to have a little history lesson about a lot of the black businesses that were here in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. They're long gone, but they were the businesses that flourished during the time that we were growing up. And I am going to ask Ms. Valerie Grinston to come up and take us down memory lane of a lot of those black businesses. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm going to sit. Okay, I had the privilege to look up some information on some of the black businesses here in Ithaca at the time that when I was around and lived on South Plain Street. And so some of the business that they had here was Sister Tucker's Catering, where she catered in her own home. We had Katie Briggs also, who was a caterer, who catered from her home. And there was B and Bobby's Bar, Jim Miller's Bar. We have the Elks Forge City Lounge, and also the barbershop that Joe Hopkins and Clarence Welch had been cutting hair. And also Eleanor Hutchison was a hairdresser, and Claudia Jenkins, who was a CJ So-and-so. So also, the three people that I have down that spurred my mind was Adolf Hellstorp, Mr. Laundryman, over on Court Street. We used to pass by there a lot. But he was born in 1915 in Baltimore, Maryland. Mr. Hellstorp served in the United States Army prior to World War II and was discharged with honor in 1938. His laundromat was located on Corn Street. That's up and around the corner. Let's see, he was the first African Americans to own businesses in Ithaca. He was employed as a cook in the fraternity at Cornell University for 32 years. Upon his retiring, it was noted that from 1960 to 1992, he mentored hundreds of young men, impressively remembered their names, hometowns, and girlfriends years after he graduated. And another business was the Fishburns that was located on Seneca Street. And the Fishburns opened in 1978, and it was Harold and Emma Fishburne were the owners. Mel Bell was the manager and the bartender because he was well known in the community and a native to Ithaca. And he was also a high school basketball star. And Harold Fishburne purchased the business from another black business owner by Jim Miller. This is establishment shared businesses of the community along with the Elks, Julios, Renos, and the Bill Bryant, just to name a few. The students from Cornell University initially came to Fishburne's for an art show and continued to come thereafter. Julian Bonds was visited after an event at Cornell, and the bar approved of the women's softball team, which won the championship, and the Fishburnes closed around 1985. And then we also have Dr. Alex Galvin, MD. He was the first and only black physician in Tompkins County. And this is one of the doctors that we went to as kids. So also, last but not least, Beverly J. Martin. I had the privilege to work in the school and to work with the children and was proud to be there as a Beverly J. Martin person that knew and took the privilege of living down the street from her on 2nd Street. So that was a very good privilege for me. But she was the first principal of elementary school in Ithaca, began appointed in 1968. She was a native of Ithaca, New York, an educator, a community leader, inspiration to anyone who knew her. In 1940, she attended Central Elementary School and graduated from Ithaca High School in 1953. She was class president. She received her college education at Cornell University, employed in the Ithaca City School District as a teacher and administrator. Ms. Martin taught 5th grade at Central School for 6 years. Her classroom offered a home for a science activity program, which was the inspiration for what would become the Science Center. Central School was renamed Beverly J. Martin in 1991 in her honor. Ms. Martin was said to be a very lively person with great sense of humor. Her warmth and presence led the children to call her Mama Bear. Well known for recruiting and mentoring many of Ithaca's great leaders, and Beverly J. Martin legacy lives on. And there was also another name, Marjorie Penelope. She was the principal, and she was administrator for Ithaca School District when she was a member of this church. So that's some of the black businesses back then in the 1960s, 50s, 1960s, 70s, and 80s. There you go. Very good, Brad.
Good job.
Thank you.
I'm impressed.
We shall not forget. They will remain in our hearts and also in the history of Ithaca. We shall not forget them. And so next, I would like to have Ms. Deborah come up. She's going to talk a little bit about some of the local homes registered as part of the Underground Railroad and the significance of the large front porches. Ms. Deborah Johnson.
It's going to be very quick. Very quick, under 3 minutes. Hi, my name is Deborah Johnson. I grew up in this amazing neighborhood of Ithaca, New York on the south side at 532 West Clinton Street. We had a gas station next door, and I took a picture. The gas was $1.24 at the time. You'll never see that again. But this neighborhood, it was just really, really amazing to us. And the friends, they were family. I mean, all the, like she said, if you messed up in the neighborhood, you got in trouble with in front of the person's house that you messed up with, and then they called your parents. By the time you got home, that was another circuit that you had to deal with. But through the Southside Community Center and this church, this was central to us. We went from school, elementary schools, straight to the South Side. We went from schools straight to AME Zion Church. We had jewelry making at the South Side. We had a connection with Cornell because students used to come down and they would work with us. They would teach us jewelry making. They would teach us several different things. You talked about the dances going on. We had amazing mentors in the neighborhood. Your father was amazing. He was just amazing. There's 2 other people we didn't mention, and that's Lily and Raymond. They were central to us. They really, really watched out for us, and they made sure we didn't get in trouble. If we got in trouble and they were around, they would straighten you out and send you home. They didn't play, but I was reading in some of the history in Ithaca, and what Michelle is talking about, something that struck me, and I never, you know, it saddens me that we did not know we lived in the midst of so much history. We were never ever told these stories. We didn't know about Frederick Douglass, and Harriet Tubman is part of my family, but I don't know to what extent. I have a cousin that knows history like crazy. His name is Leo. He lives in South Carolina now, and he'll tell you everything about him. But it saddens me that we didn't know that we had so much rich history right in the places that we lived. And I sent out an email about the properties, the Hager's house on Green Street, the Jenkins house on Green Street, all the houses on Cleveland Avenue, and I never realized this until I read that article. They have large porches. There's a significance of those porches. They use those as, they were barbers. And they brought the slaves on, and this was a main transfer point for the slaves headed to Canada. But the porches served not only to cut their hair, but to change their appearance. So they didn't, and for lack of a better term, look like slaves, you know, when they left here. They provided clothing, they provided food for them, some of them provided housing for them. So if you look up and down these streets, most of these houses have large porches, and I never even thought about it until I read this article. And I was like, wow, that's something different that we never even heard about. So we just had such a great growing up in this neighborhood. All watched out for each other. I was a member of the basketball teams you were going to. We used to get killed by all because we were all little. You know, we had practice at the South Side, and we traveled to Albany, we traveled to Syracuse, we traveled to Elmira, we traveled to Rochester. Rochester was rough. We were walking through the streets as, is it Biggie? No, what's his name? Slater. Thank you. We were walking through the streets of of Rochester, going to a basketball game. We had to find a place to eat. So the group of us, because they said don't go out alone, so we all walked together. And this crowd was coming at us, and I'm like, oh my gosh, we're gonna get in trouble. We shouldn't be out here by ourselves. Who showed up in the front of the crowd? Slater. And Slater grew up in Ithaca. I don't know if he grew up in Ithaca, but he was always here. Yeah. 6'5", you didn't mess with him. So we were safe when we saw, I mean, there were people throwing stuff out the windows at us because we weren't from there. But the trips really, it got us to know the areas around Ithaca. And that was all started from the south side. You know, the area in the gym, I don't know if you remember, used to be open. It was an open balcony, so that you could look down on the basketball games. The parties they used to have at the south side, the celebrations. As kids, when we couldn't go to the parties, we stayed at the side door. And we were so like, we wanted to get in there. We thought there was so much going on. And then by the time you got into the party, it was like, this is it. This is all we had to go through. But it was just a really great central part. This silly article that we heard that a kid was born with a cross on his head so the world was ending. We left Henry St. John's and came straight to the church. Praying on the church steps, and they laugh at me when I remind them of that, but that was central. That's something I remember about growing up here. But I'm telling you, but we couldn't get into church, so we sat on the steps. We were like, if we pray on the steps, we'd still be blessed. The world didn't end, so we were all right. But these places were just so really important to us. But take a look down the block and know that those porches aren't just there as porches for people to socialize on. They had a purpose at that time. And I thought that was something that really stood out to me in reading these articles. So, thank you very much. I know I said I didn't have much to say. But that's what happens when you grow up around greatness. And look at all of us. You know, we got to pass this on because it doesn't need to be another
22 years.
Yeah, another 20 years before we get together, or the people that grow up in this neighborhood know what they're growing up around. Our paragraph in history in high school was one paragraph. And I said, that's all we did? They said, oh, you're being disrupted, be quiet.
Right.
Yeah. They didn't want us to know this.
That's right. They didn't want us to know this.
Thank you for sharing. Each one reach one, each one teach one, and that is exactly what we're doing. May this continue on. So now I'd like to take the opportunity to have individuals add in their experiences growing up here so that we can add that to the list. And I'd like to start with Mr. Dodo Milton.
Hello, everybody. Hello. My name is Douglas Milton. That Dodo thing should be. Anyway, my family goes back a long ways, and this is my great grandfather.
Oh wow!
And he and his brother, they were slaves in Virginia, and I guess they seen there was a guy who was doing something. I can't remember what the instrument that he was using in the fields and stuff, and the slave master guy said, you know, if you break this, he broke this thing, and he said, if you break it again, I'm gonna shoot you. So my grandfather and his brother, they seen this, and so they were like light-skinned, so you know they worked in a house, so they weren't in the fields, but they seen this guy get killed, right? And they said, we should leave. So they escaped from Virginia, went to Canada, and my great-grandfather married a Mohawk Indian, and they had 17 children. Wow. So we are a part of that, like Lulu and Devora, and so we are a part of that. So my great-great-grandmother and Lulu's great-grandmother, and we're all a part of that 17 people. But we only found information about 13 of them, so there's some missing. But that is kind of like my history and stuff, and so this is on my mom's side. Now, there's the Milton side too, and my grandmother, Agnes, who was instrumental in the church over here at Calvary, and actually, my grandparents lived next door at 505, and there was a house in the back, 505 and a half. I was born in that house. So the story is that my mom and Dad was getting ready to go, this is my joke, but I think it might be sort of true, but they were getting ready to go to the movies and see, what's the guy's name? Can't think of the guy's name. Who's the cowboy? White cowboy, famous cowboy. John Wayne. And so my name was going to be John. But anyway, so the story is that my mom water broke. I slid out on the floor and I hit my head on the dresser. And there was some people there who helped my mom, you know, because my dad, I heard, was like drinking wine, and it was like, Dad, they was like, Bassel, my father's name is Bassel, right? He said, Bassel, go pick him up. He's like, no. And I think Mel Bell was there too. You're right. And so, but anyway, the ladies who were there that I remember was Miss Bibby, your grandmother, I think.
Well, that's definitely
Bibby.
Yeah. I should not forget her name.
Jamie Bucks.
No. But anyway, Miss Bibby was there. Lucy Brown was there.
Wow.
And I can't think of another lady was there, so my name was sliding along for a long time. Don't ever call me that. Don't ever call me that. That was my name. So they knew, and they were instrumental in my being alive. You know, and back then I remember my mom going to the hospital, and they said, well, you can't come in here. They had to do something because you had a dirty birth. They told my mom I was a dirty birth. You should have seen my mom was pissed off. But besides that, you know, my history's like a long time. My mom, like I said, pre-Civil War. On my dad's side, I think my grandparents' parents were here in like the 1800s. So that is kind of like my history and stuff. So I'm kind of from the dirt. You know what I mean? Anyway.
So next we're going to have Miss Lulu Carrington come to the floor and grace us with her presence and her story.
What story?
Would you like to chair it?